On November 12, 1944, an encrypted cable traveled from New York to Moscow. It described a possible new source inside America's most secret military project. He was a physicist working at a hidden laboratory in New Mexico. He understood the weapon being built there. He was intelligent, politically sympathetic, and only 19 years old. Soviet intelligence would eventually give him a fitting code name, MLAD, Youngster. His real name was Theodore Hall. At an age when most Americans were still deciding what to do with their lives, Hall had already helped build the atomic bomb and had begun giving its secrets to Joseph Stalin. He was not paid. He was not blackmailed. No handler threatened his family. Hall betrayed his country because he believed he was protecting the world. That belief would help the Soviet Union reach the atomic age, alter the balance of the Cold War, and leave behind a question no court ever answered. Was Theodore Hall a traitor who empowered a dictatorship, or a young idealist who helped prevent one nation from controlling the most destructive weapon ever made? Theodore Alvin Holtzberg was born in New York City in 1925. His parents were Jewish, and his father worked as a furrier. When Theodore was still a boy, his older brother Edward changed their surname to Hall, hoping a less recognizably Jewish name would protect them from the anti-Semitic hiring practices of the time. Theodore's intelligence appeared early. He skipped several grades, entered Queens College at 14, transferred to Harvard, and graduated in physics at 18. Professors saw a young man with an unusual ability to understand problems other students needed years to approach. In early 1944, the United States was searching universities for precisely that kind of mind. The Manhattan Project had assembled scientists, engineers, soldiers, and industrial workers across a network of secret sites. Uranium was being enriched at Oak Ridge. Plutonium was being produced at Hanford. At Los Alamos, behind fences and armed checkpoints, physicists were trying to turn those materials into weapons before Nazi Germany could do the same. Hall became the youngest physicist recruited to Los Alamos. His age did not keep him away from the central technical problems. He worked on experiments related to the plutonium implosion weapon and on calculations involving critical mass. The plutonium bomb demanded a design far more complex than simply firing two pieces of material together. Reactor-produced plutonium contained impurities that made a gun-type weapon unreliable. The Los Alamos team instead designed a sphere of plutonium surrounded by carefully shaped conventional explosives. Those charges had to detonate at nearly the same instant, sending a symmetrical shock wave inward. Compress the core correctly, and it would become supercritical. Miss the timing, or distort the pressure, and the weapon could fail. Every part of the system was secret. The explosive lenses, detonators, core geometry, material behavior under pressure, purification methods, and diagnostic tests. Hall did not possess every blueprint or command the project, but he understood enough to give Moscow something extraordinarily valuable: an independent view into the design that would become the Fat Man bomb. Los Alamos was built to separate its scientists from the outside world. Mail was censored, travel was restricted. The laboratory's location was concealed. Families could not be told what the researchers were making or even why they had disappeared into the New Mexico desert. Secrecy could isolate information. It could not isolate conscience. Many scientists had joined the project because they feared Hitler might obtain an atomic bomb first. But by 1944, Germany's nuclear effort appeared far less advanced than they had once imagined. The Soviet Union was still an American wartime ally and had suffered catastrophic losses fighting the Nazis. At the same time, some scientists were beginning to ask what the United States would do if it emerged from the war with an atomic monopoly. Hall was intensely troubled by that possibility. He had left-wing sympathies and viewed the Soviet Union through the idealized lens shared by some young Western radicals. To him, a single country possessing the bomb created the possibility of global coercion. If another great power also possessed it, neither side could use the weapon without fearing retaliation. This was not yet the mature doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Intercontinental missiles, thermonuclear arsenals, and secure second strike forces did not exist. Hall's idea was simpler. Monopoly invited domination. Balance might force restraint. But he was balancing an abstraction against a real regime. Stalin's Soviet Union was not merely a wartime ally. It was a dictatorship shaped by purges, forced labor, censorship, engineered terror, and mass death. Hall could condemn the danger of American power while badly misjudging the government he intended to strengthen. No electorate had authorized him to redistribute nuclear secrets. No judge, legislature, or international body had examined his reasoning. One 19-year-old scientist had decided that he possessed the moral authority to change the future of two superpowers. During leave in October 1944, Hall returned to New York and approached his former Harvard roommate, Seville Sachs. Sachs shared his politics and agreed to help. Neither man was a trained spy. They had no secure radio, no established handler, and no understanding of how quickly an amateur contact attempt could attract attention. They simply began looking for someone connected to the Soviet government. Hall approached the national office of the Communist Party. The search eventually led him to Sergei Kurnikov, a Soviet intermediary and military writer in New York. Hall prepared a report describing personnel at Los Alamos and the basic science of the plutonium implosion project. He offered it voluntarily. For Soviet intelligence, the approach was almost too good to believe. A teenage American physicist had appeared without recruitment and offered access to the most closely guarded military project in the world. He could be a genuine ideological volunteer. He could also be part of an elaborate American deception. Kurnikov assessed him. The technical material was studied. His age, family, education, politics, and access were transmitted to Moscow. The November cable recommended maintaining contact. The Soviets accepted him. Hall became MLAD. Seville Sachs became Star and served as a courier, carrying messages and reducing Hall's need to meet Soviet officers directly. Later, Venona decrypts would preserve both code names long after the young men believed the evidence of their work had disappeared. Hall provided information about the plutonium implosion design and processes connected to the production and purification of nuclear material. After leaving Los Alamos, he maintained contact with Soviet intelligence for a period while pursuing graduate study at the University of Chicago. But the popular image of Hall handing Stalin a complete atomic bomb is false. The Soviet Union had several sources inside the Anglo-American nuclear effort. Klaus Fuchs, an accomplished physicist who worked in Britain and at Los Alamos, supplied detailed technical reports. David Greenglass, provided less sophisticated information. Couriers and case officers moved documents across borders. Other agents penetrated related institutions. And intelligence alone could not produce a bomb. Under physicist Igor Kurchatov, Soviet scientists still had to test materials, solve engineering problems, construct factories, and assemble an enormous industrial program. Lavrenti Beria's security apparatus drove that effort with pressure, surveillance, and fear. Thousands of workers, including prisoners in the Soviet forced labor system, were consumed by the project. Hall's importance was not that he replaced Soviet science. He helped it choose a proven path. Reports from multiple spies could be compared. When Hall's information matched material from Fuchs and other sources, Soviet planners gained confidence that the implosion design was genuine. Espionage reduced uncertainty, warned against expensive dead ends, and allowed Moscow to move faster than it might have through research alone. On July 16, 1945, the implosion system was tested at Trinity in the New Mexico desert. Weeks later, the United States destroyed Hiroshima with a uranium bomb and Nagasaki with a plutonium implosion weapon. Japan surrendered. The bomb, built to end one war, immediately became the central threat of the next. For 4 years, the United States held the world's only nuclear arsenal. Then, on August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated RDS-1 at the Semipalatinsk test site. The device closely followed the American plutonium implosion design. The atomic monopoly was over. American officials had expected the Soviets to obtain a bomb eventually, but many had not expected it so soon. The test intensified fears of communist penetration, accelerated debate over the hydrogen bomb, and pushed both nations toward weapons thousands of times more powerful than the device Hall had helped expose. Did he create stability? Nuclear balance may have made leaders more cautious about direct war between the superpowers. It also produced an arms race that eventually filled the world with tens of thousands of warheads. Cities became targets. Bombers remained airborne. Missile crews waited underground. Governments rehearsed retaliation on a scale that could end organized civilization. Hall had imagined that shared fear might restrain power. He could not control what fear would build. He also did not know that the United States had begun collecting the messages that would reveal him. Soviet intelligence traffic used one-time pad encryption. When used correctly, each page of key material is unique, making the ciphertext effectively impossible to solve. But under wartime production pressure, Soviet cryptographic personnel accidentally reused portions of some pads. That error opened a narrow mathematical crack. Beginning in 1943, American cryptanalysts accumulated and studied thousands of Soviet messages. Progress was painfully slow. Reused keys allowed fragments to be attacked, but the cables remained full of missing groups, uncertain translations, abbreviations, and code names. There was no machine that printed a list of spies. Analysts had to reconstruct it. An alias in one cable was compared with a profession in another. Travel dates, friendships, family details, university records, and access to classified projects were matched against partial text. Years after the original transmissions, the program, later known as Venona, began exposing Soviet networks inside the United States. Among the recovered code names was MLAD. Biographical details pointed to Theodore Hall. His relationship with Seville Sachs helped confirm the identification. By 1950, the FBI understood that Hall was the young Los Alamos source described in Soviet traffic. Knowing it and proving it in court were different things. FBI agents interviewed Hall and Sachs in 1951. Hall denied espionage. The Bureau had not caught him passing documents, had no confession, and could not produce a cooperating witness who could establish the case publicly. His Soviet contact had already left the country, and Hall was no longer engaged in the underground activity investigators hoped to observe. Venona was the strongest evidence. It was also evidence the government was unwilling to reveal. An open trial could expose that American cryptanalysts had penetrated Soviet communications. Prosecutors would have to defend fragmentary decrypts, translations, codename identifications, and their chain of custody before a jury. Revealing the program might sacrifice an intelligence capability more valuable than a conviction. Hall later recalled walking out of his FBI interview expecting handcuffs before he reached the elevator. They never came. The Bureau continued investigating and monitoring him, but no prosecutable independent case emerged. Unlike Klaus Fuchs, who confessed in Britain, or David Greenglass, who implicated others, Hall gave investigators nothing they could safely take into court. He returned to science. Hall completed his doctorate at the University of Chicago and later worked at the Sloan Kettering Institute in New York. In 1962, he moved with his wife and family to Britain for a research position at Cambridge. There, the former atomic physicist developed a second career in biophysics, contributing to electron microscopy and X-ray microanalysis used to study the elemental composition of tiny biological structures. To most colleagues, Theodore Hall was a serious Cambridge scientist. The teenager called MLAD remained hidden inside classified files. That separation lasted until the 1990s. The United States began publicly releasing Venona material in 1995. Declassified documents linked MLAD to Hall, while journalists and historians assembled the details from intelligence records, interviews, and Soviet archival material. The past finally reached Cambridge. Hall's first public responses were cautious, but in 1997 he issued a statement explaining that an American nuclear monopoly had seemed dangerous and should be avoided. Later remarks made the essential admission clearer. He had passed atomic information because he believed breaking that monopoly was the right thing to do. He did not offer simple repentance. He acknowledged that his youthful view of the Soviet Union had been distorted, but continued to defend the fear that had driven him. That distinction makes Hall more difficult to dismiss than a spy motivated by money, and more dangerous as a moral example. Sincerity does not erase consequence. Hall saw a genuine problem. A nation with exclusive possession of the atomic bomb could threaten others without facing the same weapon in return. The secrecy surrounding the Manhattan Project also denied the public any meaningful debate, while young scientists built devices capable of annihilating cities. But Hall answered one concentration of power by secretly strengthening another. He trusted his own judgment over every democratic institution and transferred apocalyptic knowledge to a regime whose brutality he failed to understand. He was not the man who single-handedly gave Stalin the bomb. Soviet science, industry, forced labor, and several intelligence sources all contributed. Nor can anyone prove that Hall prevented a nuclear war. The world offers no alternate timeline in which the Soviet bomb arrived later and the consequences can be measured. What can be said is narrower and harder. Theodore Hall acted from conviction. His information mattered. It helped Soviet planners confirm the implosion route and reduced uncertainty in their atomic program. The resulting balance may have restrained direct conflict, but it also became the foundation of a vast machinery of mutual destruction. Hall died in Cambridge in 1999 without ever facing trial. The question survived him because it is larger than espionage. When governments possess the power to destroy millions, does an individual conscience have the right to intervene? And if that intervention empowers another dictatorship, can a noble intention survive the result? Hall gave his answer at 19. History is still calculating the cost. Was Theodore Hall a traitor, a misguided idealist, or both? Tell us where you draw the line in the comments. Subscribe to The Modern Ledger and continue with our next file from the secret history of the Cold War. The verdict may remain unsettled. The ledger does not forget.